When we know the history of how our community evolved, we can better appreciate it today. Archie Park reminds us that the town of Archie was one of the original settlements on Old Mission Peninsula that existed in the late 1800s to the mid-1900s. As the Archie community evolved, the settlement was supported by the Archie Post Office, Archie Hall, the Methodist Church, and Archie Schools. The town of Archie is now listed as one of 10 ghost towns in Grand Traverse County. George McManus is one of a few who grew up in the Archie neighborhood, and in a 2023 interview, he shared stories of his early childhood days, as well as those passed down from his parents and grandparents. Archie Park today is a staging area for bikers, paddleboarders, scuba divers, and is a getaway spot for those looking for a nostalgic roadside park. This is about Archie's past as told by George McManus, and Archie Park today is told by those who value what has been passed down from previous generations for us to enjoy.
Archie was from my neighborhood, all that end of the peninsula. And so I thought if I named this book after that, at least the name will be out there. I didn't want the place to be forgotten because it was important in my time and in my dad's day and my grandparents' day as part of the peninsula. We were all, those of us that lived in that area we're from Archie. That's where you're from. You're not from Old Mission or from Ogdensburg or Mapleton or wherever. You're from Archie. And the Archie neighborhood on the peninsula goes from Island View Road to Traverse City. That's all Archie. The first postmaster was a man by the name of last name Warren, D-A-W-A-R-R-E-N. The Warrens are still out there. You've got that one that bought Uncle Steve Carroll's place on Island View Road. That's a Warren, and there's one of them was police chief in Traverse City. One of them, Eb Warren, used to write for the DNR back in my day. That was an older brother. But anyway, this Warren, I don't remember what his name was, but he had a baby that died. And so he named that post office, and the baby's name was Archie. And so he named that post office after that baby. That's how that place got named. Wow. And but if you get a hold of the feds, I do not have a copy of it, but I have seen the postal stamp from Archie. And there was a big difference between whether you came from Archie or whether you came from Old Mission, or, everybody talks about the Old Mission Peninsula. Well, that's nice, but it's not all Old Mission. It's an important part of it, and it was the original post office, and everything was there. You know where the park is? Yes. And you go past the intersection of the Bluff Road and Gray Road and M37. Yes. There's a little rise there, and the post office is right on the top of that rise. I had to bring the mail from Traverse City out and drop it off at each one of those post office. Think about that. And when I was a teenager, there was a hall there, and we in the wintertime would go down to the Archie Hall. It was called the Archie Hall, and we'd go down there and play volleyball inside in the wintertime. And there was no inside john or water in the inside, but there was a stove. We could get the stove, get the fire going, had a long stove pipe that go the full length of the hall and get the heat off in it, and then we'd play basketball. And so I went there in my lifetime, and I was probably 13 or 14 years old. It was, I'm sure, during World War II. And my parents danced there. they danced there and courted there and so on and so forth in that Archie Hall. That was one of the big things, was the dances. There were several dance halls on the peninsula, and my dad, one is at Old Mission. The Hill Sisters had a dance hall there. It's a two-story. It's still standing, but it's ready to fall down. When Mrs. Doan, she was originally a Cropa, but she was talking about dancing with my granddad at Bowers Harbor.
Okay.
She was a Cropa from the Harbor Cropas. There was two sets of Cropas on the peninsula. The Harbor, Frisky Bert and Harbor Bert. And my grandpa was from Devil's Dive Road.
Okay.
And so they had a dance hall there. And I definitely know Archie was a dance hall. My Uncle Elmer, one of my dad's brothers, got stabbed there. They got well, that wasn't hard to expect because I don't know who picked the fight, but anyway, they had to go outside, to settle the issue. And somebody come tearing in there to get my dad, go out there and help his brother Elmer because he was fighting with these guys. And anyway, when they got things settled, Elmer had been stabbed. It didn't kill him or anything. I don't think it was ever a government building. When I was selling my books, one of the Kilmurrays from the West Shore, I'm pretty sure it was Jim Kilmurray's son, pointed out to me, he said, I have a bond from when they built the Archie Hall. So I'm suspecting what happened is that they took up they sold bonds in the neighborhood to get the money to build the hall. And that's how it got there. So I think you should go to the plat or go to the Register of Deeds in the county and get the original plat of Archie Park. I don't know what year that was, but I suspect it's a little chunk off the next farm next door.
Okay.
Probably donated. I didn't think quick enough when I had a bunch of people around there and I was selling books. I didn't think quick enough to offer to trade him a book for that bond, or I'd have it. Because apparently at some point in history, Peninsula Township took that whole thing over, and then apparently eventually they decided, rather than redo it, to tear it down. It didn't burn, as far as I know. I played ball there when I was a teenager, and that would be in the 40s. So it was perfectly good shape then, and I know, I'm guessing it was around for at least 20 after that, at least through the 50s. It must have been about in the 60s and so on when that got tore down. To the left of where the hall was, there was several signs apparently there was a church there at one time.
The archives at the Peninsula Library indicated there was a Methodist church at the present site of Archie Park. In 1893, the church at Archie was consolidated with another Methodist church that was built in Ogdensburg. That church was later torn down, and a new one was built in 1957 at the corner of Center and Ladd Roads. Records show that Archie School No. 4 was built on Gray Road on land donated by A.P. Gray around 1883. The one-room log Archie Schoolhouse burned down in 1893, and two new school districts were created, McKinley and Stony Beach. At that time, schools were located every 2 to 3 miles, so the longest walk to school would be 1.5 miles, or so the stories go. McKinley School, District No. 6, and named for President William McKinley, was built in 1901 at the corner of McKinley and Center Roads. Today, it's a residence, but has maintained the original structure of the school. Stony Beach School was built on land donated by Mr. Frank French at the corner of Montague and Center Roads. An addition was added in 1908 as a result of increased enrollment. Today, it's a residence with some of the same structure of the school in place. Maple Grove School, District Number 7, was one of 7 one-room schoolhouses on the peninsula, built in 1896 at the corner of Carroll and Center Roads. This is where George McManus went to school through 7th grade, and Maple Grove School is a setting for his stories.
Originally, we had, Peninsula had 7 school districts, and sometime in early history, the Bars Harbor School had so few pupils that they joined the Bars Harbor School with the Mapleton. So when I was out there in school, there were six districts. I went to Maple Grove School, K through 7, and my teacher was Mrs. Pitcher, Lenora Pitcher, and my grandfather had a 3rd grade education. He was on the school board, and most of the teachers in the county were getting $35 a month. And he hired Mrs. Pitcher and paid her $50 a month because he thought she was a good teacher, and she was. And she used to, her husband would drive her out from Traverse City. He worked at the railroad, and he'd drive her out every day and back. And so I went to school there, K through 7, except for one winter during the war when gasoline was so scarce. And my dad was running the Anderson farm, which is closer to Traverse, and couldn't afford to wear your rubber tires up and your gasoline running back and forth between our home on Carroll Hill, and so we had lived at the Anderson farm that winter, and I had to go to McKinley School, which was on the corner of McKinley, and there's a guy who lives there now. And I went there, and I had Mrs. Critchell was a teacher from Traverse. That's another interesting story. When you go, the Catholic Church is on the corner there and all of that, and then you go down the hill and up the next hill, and then Mary Lyons. That's the next hill. Well, see, they're in the Mapleton district, but those kids all went to our school. Now, why that all happened, I don't know, except their mother, the Lyons' mother, was from England. She was fairly well educated, and she had quite a bit to say in the PTA meetings and so on. She might have liked Mrs. Pitcher being a teacher or something, but those kids that lived in the Mapleton district went to our school. And the kids that lived, the Coolidge kids that lived also in the Mapleton district, where the church is now, they went to Mapleton. And what that was all about, when you came into the school from the front, on the right-hand side, the boys went, and left as where the girls went. And so the boys all hang their coats and put their boots, and there was a shelf there for your lunchbox, but the boys and the girls were separated. They didn't both be on the same side. Everybody had their desk, and then you had a recitation bench up in front. And so when you were called on, you went up the recitation bench and give the lesson and back to the deal. And there was 35 of us in the school in 8 grades. I was not necessarily a goody-goody kid or anything like that, but we weren't able to get into a hell of a lot because my grandparents lived right behind the school, and you could always run up to Grandma McManus as if you wanted something. That's an interesting story too. Dad worked 3 whole winters getting those school districts out there consolidated, because his philosophy, which was true, he wanted to get them consolidated rather than have Traverse City picking them off one at a time. And so him and Becky Tompkins, Cy's wife, they were the biggies on that deal. I remember him, Frank, my brother, and I had to do the work on the farm because the old man was working on that damn stool stuff, and he was all. But anyway, they got it consolidated, and then they had to decide where they were going to build a consolidated school. And my dad wanted it up there. The Huffmans had a hayfield up there where that building is. They had never planted the orchard. Ideal spot overlooking the harbor. They were right in the middle of the peninsula. Well, Roy Hooper had been the supervisor, and he was the big politician out there, and he wanted to put it down by where Bars Harbor Park is. You go across the road and go up towards Peninsula Fruit Exchange.
Yep.
You know, you could get land there for $500 an acre, and they wanted the Huffmans wanted $1,000 an acre for that up on the hill. And Hooper was pushing to save that money, and anyway, they had a discussion before they got that solved, and they put it up on a school. Well, then the next thing that happened, they put the well out for bids, and a guy from Clare come up, and he got the bid. There was several bid, but he got the low bid because he had asked around all the wells in the neighborhood of any amount were all 250 feet deep. And the morning he started drilling, he come over our place at noon, talked to Dad. I thought you talked stuff with 250 feet deep around here. Got all kinds of water at like 70 feet or something like that. He said, of course, he didn't make any money drilling. and everybody figured on top of that hill, you'd probably go at least 250 feet. Well, the first well I put in didn't. It was plenty of water. But I understand since that time, the health regulations and so on have required him to go deeper. But that first well driller, he didn't make any money on it because they didn't have any distance to drill. It was definitely known as a neighborhood, as an identified place, but that's all kind of got lost. Well, once you took the school districts out, that kind of changed everything. It became designated a park when the township took it over. I think you should go to the Register of Deeds in the county and try and get an original plat of Archie Park. They must have had some kind of a transfer of the deed from that farmer, whoever gave that property, to whoever he gave it to. They have several parks. They got Pillsbury, and they got Hazerat, and they've got Bars Harbor, and they got a half a dozen parks out there. I'm glad they're taking an interest in that park. We don't lose the history of it.
Today, it continues to be a place where people gather. For scuba divers, it's a place to learn the sport and explore what lies below the surface of East Bay.
So I've seen Bigfoot. There's a statue of Bigfoot, about yay tall.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and there's this smallmouth bass, and it's very distinguishable with its tail. It looks like, it's been in battle. It's got a jagged tail, and there's a wound on the side of it, and it's a good-sized fish.
For paddleboarders, it's a place to experience the beauty of East Bay while getting exercise and feeling the joy of being on the water. For those who want to take a ride out on the peninsula, it's a place to stop and enjoy the scenery and take a dip in the bay. And for bikers, it's a perfect gathering place to bike the peninsula and see some of the best views in northern Michigan.
I'm Cody Silvis. I've lived in Traverse City for most of my life. I live kind of at the base of the peninsula, and the majority of the outside riding that I do throughout the year is on Old Mission. Mission is just the best place to ride. It's so accessible from almost any place in town. Once you get a couple miles out, it's pretty rare to see traffic, which is really nice. It's great roads, some of the best views that you'll find in northern Michigan. And it's just so accessible for people. It's flat, it's hilly, it's whatever you want, and it's pretty rare to be able to do that on a single ride. Archie Park is sort of like a kind of an important waypoint for people. It's a place where groups can kind of gather up before they head out. People will park and start their rides here. And it's also a great kind of last stop on the way back into town. There's so many different ways to ride the peninsula. You can get 1,000 feet of climbing and never go past, a couple miles out. There's really great gravel roads near the lighthouse. If you're going north and south, it's usually pretty flat. And every time you go east and west, you can put in as much climbing as you want. So there's a million ways to ride it, and it always kind of feels new and kind of fresh. Yeah, you definitely need to know where there might be air or tools in case you need a repair, and it's something that we always kind of like mention to people that are riding out here is, if there is a need to stop, there's a place to do it in a pretty convenient spot. If you're on Old Mission, life is good.
Well, I'm glad they're keeping it going because it was a social, talk about society or a social life of the peninsula. It was an important part, but Old Mission gets mentioned all the time, but you don't hear much about, well, you don't really hear much about Mapleton either, but you still hum there. But I'm glad to see if somebody's keeping it alive because it was a big part of the history of the peninsula.